The world of entertainment is turning upside down. Massive movies and IPs are hitting the red giant phase of their lifespan, and the sheer amount of fuel they consume is going to turn into a problem for them. They're running out of gas and are about to dissipate into nothing more than tiny little husks of what they once were. Hollywood, on one hand, is looking at things like it's a problem of not enough money, but the truth is that the problem is that their writing is shit! These green guzzling behemoths are on the verge of sputtering out, and that's gonna leave a huge fucking vacuum in the entertainment world. Well, as luck would have it, there's plenty of people chomping at the bit to gather up the shattered pieces of every fandom they can grab at, in hopes of filling that void once the gravity of these powerhouse properties vanishes. Oh yeah, the independent creators that are going to take over the future are going balls to the wall while Hollywood continues to drop the ball like Hunter Biden in his 8-ball. Well, that's a thing I've done now, so welcome to the video. Alright, thanks for enduring my piss poor RazorFist impression, but there's a reason that I did that. The object of today's scrutiny is none other than RazorFist's very own Nightvale series, both part 1 and part 2. If ever there was something that showed just how beautiful the English language can be when used by someone with massive diction, this would be it. My first impression just off of book 1 is that the language is incredible. It isn't dumbed down and it isn't simple. It's beautiful and colorful, and it's an excellent example of just how great the English language can be when used properly. Yeah, I could go ahead and turn this into a mental masturbation session about how amazing written English can actually be, but I'm pretty sure you just want me to get into the details of the book. So what is it about? Well, Nightvale is a pulp noir fiction series starring one particularly unlucky thief named Xerxes. After picking the wrong joint to try and rob, Xerxes finds himself entangled in some very bloody underworld politics, and it leads him to cross paths with some very powerful crime bosses who have their sights set on a heist like no other. The plot's fairly simple. Xerxes gets deeper into the shit, finding that he no longer has a choice but to work for said crime bosses. And when they try to double-cross him, he decides to take matters into his own hands and rob them blind. But that quickly backfires, there's blood spilled, and Xerxes decides to go on the war path. One of the things I really have to praise is that there's no slop in the story. It covers only the parts that are really integral to what's going on. There are no detours. It's short and to the point, and simultaneously still thrilling and wildly entertaining. And the same goes for the sequel, Death Mask, where part 1, The Long Moonlight, sets up a lot of the world and acts as the foundation. Death Mask continues to build on that, adding more to the world building and more to the lore, establishing new cultures and adding new information. Fleeing Novella after inciting the Long Moonlight, Xerxes finds himself once again wrapped up in the underhanded politics of the criminal underworld. Only this time, he is now actively involved in retrieving a medallion from a vault on an abandoned estate in the middle of a desert occupied by dangerous monsters. And now things only get more complicated once Xerxes encounters 2 other would-be thieves licking their chops at the same prospects. At that point, a tenuous alliance forms, and after a series of betrayals, Xerxes emerges temporarily on top. But as per Xerxes' poor fortune, that only lasts so long, and he ends up just barely escaping in one piece. One of the things I really like about this book series is that it doesn't treat you like a retard. What I mean by that is it assumes you're intelligent enough to infer things from the story and put all the pieces together yourself so that the unsaid parts can get cut out. It makes dialogue more intriguing and characters feel a whole lot more fleshed out. It also allows for you to really get the minutiae of a character, their inner workings, their intelligence, their wit, their skills, all without it having to be spelled out for you. Quips and jabs play out really well. The exchanges, again, treat you like you have more than 2 brain cells to rub together and figure things out. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of dialogue from older movies, and as an aside, I recently watched Citizen Kane, and wow, does the dialogue really pop from that series, much like this one. But hey, maybe I'm just overburdened with the awful structuring of dialogue in a lot of modern entertainment. That might be swaying my opinion here. So yeah, it's nice to not have Nightvale showing its hand at every turn. Sure, there are times where it has footnotes to explain certain terminology and give you a little nugget of information that you would miss otherwise. But a lot of the world building is done in a way as if you were actually living in the world and you know what's going on. You're not treated as stupid, you're treated as a part of that world, and it helps draw you in. This is something I really love, where the author gives you just enough information for you to understand what's going on and comprehend the bigger picture, but at the same time leaving a little bit of intrigue and a little bit of mystery behind all of what's being said. It keeps things coherent and understandable without taking a bunch of time out of your reading session to dump this massive cultural dissertation on your head. It avoids bogging you down with boring slogs through extended diatribes about how things work, and just assumes that eventually you'll come to understand everything that's going on, or that you only need so much information to keep going. Yes, there is a place where these sort of long-winded explanations are useful, but this method that's used here in Nightvale is better at keeping the story short, compact, and efficient. It also helps build that sense of immersion much more quickly. Because of this, there's a level of mystery to the world, and that gets filled out as you watch the story of Xerxes, the world's most unlucky thief, unfold. These little nuggets help the world feel complete, and it makes the whole series, especially the blank expanse beyond the pages, feel like a complete world. Honestly, without all the big information dumps, it feels like the world has a very deep history, and there's a lot of things behind why it is the way it is. Another thing I really like about these books is that they can be read individually, even though they're still a part of a series. What I mean by that is that while they are centered on the same character and in the same universe, they are self-contained stories, and that means that they can be read individually. A book begins a storyline, has the whole arc, and completes it all in one session. You're not left on a cliffhanger to where if you read the next one without reading the first one, you won't understand what's going on. You could start Death Mask without reading The Long Moonlight and still get an entire story, unlike you would with Lord of the Rings if you started with The Two Towers or Return of the King. I personally really like this kind of structure because it gives you a sense of completion after each book without leaving you on a cliffhanger. You get a full story out of it, and you don't have to sit there for however many months on end waiting for the next piece. Characters are done really well too. They're not overly simplified, and they're not overly complicated. At the same time, Nightvale maintains that sense of believable mortality. Thus, it keeps at bay the notion of excessive plot armor. Honestly, it's very dramatic with the up and down cyclical motion of how these things play out. You start to feel like characters actually will be harmed. Things actually can happen to them that will hurt them. There are losses, there are injuries, all of that stuff. You don't feel like any character is automatically going to make it through because they have to. Xerxes certainly isn't perfect, and that adds to the suspense and the thrill of the story. As things go sideways, his plans don't pan out. He has to adapt on the spot, and it shows his wit and intelligence as well as his skill. He certainly isn't peerless, but he is skilled. Other characters like underworld kingpins really fill their own shoes in that matter too, because they feel intelligent, imposing, and threatening whenever they're around. The way they talk, the way they act, the way they handle situations, it all fits their persona. They don't throw you off, they all give you the impression that they are in charge. One thing though is that sometimes character progression feels a little forced. There are a few incidences where I feel like things wouldn't have happened a certain way. Some characters start getting along unnecessarily. But then again, I still do have to keep in mind that these characters are sort of strong-armed into working together. They don't have a choice. And if one messes with the other, it could result in backlash against them. And that, in a sense, helps lend to the idea that this is a very dog-eat-dog world where everyone is looking out for their own and isn't really unwilling to trample on everyone else around them. But now we've circled all the way back around to more superficial details, and we get to look at the artwork on the inside and on the cover of the book. And now, maybe it's just me, I might just be a child at heart, but I really do love chapter titles, and I really do love illustrations in novels. And one thing I gotta say is that Julianne Greip, I don't know how to pronounce that name, and George Alexopoulos do an excellent job with their artwork. Now, I do prefer Julianne Greip's artwork over Alexopolis's. It's just a matter of style and taste, but both do excellent overall. Artwork isn't exactly something that makes a book good, but it certainly does accent how good a book is. You get to see how environments really are, what characters look like, their reactions, their interactions. You can tell a lot from an illustration. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Again, nothing against Alexopolis. I think he's an amazing artist, but I did prefer the artwork for the first book better. All that being said, these books legitimately did have me excited to read them. And at the end of the day, they are works of art put together by a craftsman who really loves what he's doing and makes something that he would love to read. That's part of the way you achieve greatness in storytelling. You go for something that you're passionate about. Now, I'll admit that the thievery and subterfuge kind of stories really aren't in my wheelhouse, so that did influence somewhat how I rated these books. But even still, I am a sucker for a good story, and I have to admit that these were very entertaining and they were very good to read. I love these books because they're simple, excellently constructed, and intelligent fiction. In a way, it reflects a lot of what older styles of writing and storytelling used to do, particularly in terms of character structure and dialogue. And on top of that, these stories aren't overly contrived, world-spanning adventures built on convoluted series of events. Ultimately, though, there is one complaint I want to add, and it's I feel like the books didn't quite last long enough. It kind of left me a tad bit unsatisfied, like a really good meal that just doesn't quite fill you up all the way. Now, that seems like an odd complaint, especially when I've praised the book for being efficient, straight to the point, and only covering what it needs to. But at the same time, I feel like it still could have added a little bit more action, a little bit more tension, drawn the story out a little bit more, fit some things in there that would have fleshed characters out a bit more. There were some characters in there who I feel like didn't quite fully live out their potential. There were some things in there that I felt like were rushed. Certain character connections in the first book I feel like proceeded way too quickly. I will note, though, that my critique there is very minor. It is not a game-ending problem. So regardless of how nitpicky my critiques are, this series is still very worth your time. I think, especially for amateur writers, it's a really good one to read because it shows you just how well the English language can play out when used by someone who understands just how to use it. It's a great demonstration of how a masterful understanding of the English language can really enhance your writing. It's also a great example of excellent and efficient storytelling. Again, my praise goes out to this series for not wasting time dumping massive amounts of information on you. It gives you what you need. It tells the story that it's there to tell, and it doesn't get sidetracked, lost in the weeds doing something it doesn't need to do. But I think it's time to shut my yap and end this video. I'm Crimson Law, and God fucking speed! Sorry, I had to do that at least once. I really hope that doesn't cause any problems. It's not like I'm trying to mock the guy. Or I could just keep doing it like a little clout goblin. That's always an option. Yeah, not like many people are going to see this video anyway, so... Hey, consider liking and subscribing, maybe. I'm going to do more weeb stuff, more independent creative stuff. We'll see how this thing goes. Later.